Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome in. It is the Fantasy Football Hustle powered by Pro Football Focus. And tonight it's a PFF powder keg, if you want to call it. We've got PFF North, we've got PFF South, from Columbus, Ohio to outside of Dallas, Texas. It is Dwayne McFarland. It is Ian Hartitz joining me, Brian Drake, on the Hustle. Gentlemen, it's almost draft season, so we're ready to go. Dwayne, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
Dude, I'm great. Me and Ian may be separated by, a large amount, of land between us, but Drake, we're both Cowboys fans. So both Dallas at heart. So sorry. I mean, I know you got your little Eagles light. That's really cute. That Eagles light looks really good back there behind you.
It's almost as good as the tiny ravishing Rick Rude doll that I have in front of the trophy back there. But yeah, like I said, folks, it is the Fantasy Football Hustle. Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com, Dwayne McFarland from PFF and ETR. Tonight we're going to have a great show because we talk about hustling here, never getting out hustled. That's kind of our moniker. But today it's a great day to be great with a guy who exemplifies hustle, because I don't see anybody in the business working harder than him. From 800 podcasts a week to writing articles to dominating Twitter, it's Ian Hartitz. How are you, my friend? Welcome in and let us know what's in the glass.
That's right. I got some cheap as hell California Roots Red Blend Sheesh. Enjoying it. Thank you guys for having me on. It's been a minute. Dwayne, I thought we were cutting it up nice and hot this year on the PFF Fantasy Football Pod, previewing every week. And man, we are almost in what I consider like full-on fantasy football off season. We were saying before, like, my goodness, guys, really, like, usually we have the combine at least to kind of, free agency combine, then just to stretch to the draft. I feel like no combine, like just having to deal with this pro day hoopla, man. It's just been one same kind of stuff week after week. So I'm excited to get these rosters set and then move on with our lives. Cause I mean, a lot of good stuff happening, but at the same time, come on, let's get these players set. I'm ready.
Yeah, you have no idea, but we know the draft is now under 10 days away, depending on when you're listening to it. And we want to make sure you are locked and loaded and ready to go. And we want you to head over to PFF.com. Use promo code HUSTLE for 25% off any PFF subscription and access to all PFF's fantasy football rankings, their locked article, stuff like Ian writes about. And we're going to talk about one of his great articles tonight. And all this stuff you can't get anywhere else. It's promo code HUSTLE. Hey, folks, by the way, if you go over to PFF.com, you can actually save 30% with another promo code. You'll see it. It's all over the site. It's draft 30. But anyways, use our promo code. They'll think somebody actually listens to the show. So we're going to have to ask you about this. PFF is hosting a live draft show on PFF.com, April 29th to May 1st. They're going to have every round covered. They got Collinsworth on there, all the analysts, the guys from PFF. Are you going to be involved in this? Can we hear you breaking down picks?
Yeah, they're giving me like my own little solo green screen thing. I'm going to be giving, some props to all the fantasy guys going on. It's been funny working with, the quote unquote real football analysts throughout the whole ordeal. We were saying when a running back gets drafted, just cut away from everyone cursing out the pick and get to me, and I'll have plenty of good things to say about it. So yeah, that'll be fun, man. And it's funny how it's working out though, because it's obviously Thursday, first round, and then Friday, I actually have my second COVID vaccination. So I'm being an MVP driving from Cincy to Columbus, back to Cincy. We're going to fight through the pain, get through rounds 2 and 3, hopefully not be shut up in a hotel room for the following days, but I'm pumped.
Tremendous stuff there. And of course, yes, guys, he is the host of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I want to ask you about that because you do a tremendous job, and I've tweeted it out. I have no problem promoting other people's podcasts if someone's doing a great job. And I thought Ian did a tremendous job filling in. Jeff Radcliffe, of course, was doing that show for a minute, and you came in and just really, I think, took it to the next level. Now, you were doing shows Sunday night after the games. You're doing stuff all throughout the week. When do you sleep, man? And how many were you doing? You don't get burned out on this? Dwayne and I get burned out doing one show a week.
It was it was basically Sunday through Thursday during the season. The one change I'm gonna make next year, like, look, the Sunday night one was ridiculous, and a bunch of talking for usually 75, 80 minutes straight. That was hard. And, you look, if you go to like my podcast reviews, like a lot of it's like, bro, like slow down. Like, I can hear you swallowing or this or that. And it's like, yeah, man, you try talking for 80 minutes straight. But I realized that and I'm adjusting. And next year, the one difference I'm going to make is there's no need to stay up till, 12:30, 1 a.m. on a Monday or Thursday to wait out for those games that everyone is really seeing anyway. So I'm going to really focus more on a waiver wire pod on Monday, DFS pod on Thursday. We're improving, working smarter, not necessarily harder. So it'll be good. And at the end of the day, all about football. I mean, Dwayne's the real MVP, man. He would come on my podcast. We'd go over 60 minutes, usually breaking down game by game. And then I'm pretty sure he'd hop right back on over to this one afterwards. So, I'm lucky enough to call this my day job for now, at least. So I'm happy to put in the hours for, 4 months out of the year to get to drink some sheesh with you guys the rest of the time.
Dwayne, we've got Marcus Mosher, so it's Cowboy Central here. But, he's stopping in, and just everyone's dropping the elbow on the Eagles fan in the room over here. Holy moly,
Marcus has got. It's like hitting a double. Ian's got on the Raiders shirt, and we got the two Cowboy fans. So,
Bo Jackson, I support Bo.
So what we're going to do, folks, tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about Ian, his career, the fantasy industry as a whole. We're going to do a little Mythbusters game where I've got a few questions. Maybe they are quote unquote myths about fantasy football. And our two studs here, Dwayne and Ian, are going to break down the myths and see if they still hold water to this day. And then we're obviously going to talk about the draft, and we're going to find some fantasy friendly landing spots. There's a couple of teams out there, especially at running back, who are going to need them. Jets, Steelers, Falcons, maybe Cardinals. So we'll see where the guys think people should land there. So you were a guy who played linebacker at the University of Illinois, Chicago, right?
No, University of Chicago, D3.
University of Chicago. I'm sorry. I was going to say I've been to that school. It was University of Illinois, Chicago. Our fraternity's headquarters had some kind of like summer camp or something for drunk frat boys, and I went out there and hung out in Chicago. But
fun facts, real quick.
Please.
Cut you off. Jay Berwanger, first ever Heisman winner, University of Chicago, and undefeated all time against Notre Dame. So roll Maroons.
John Dagg popping in here. Imagine booking Hartitz on 420. So
happy holidays, everyone. I've been participating all day.
Hey, this is what we got. People think that this show is planned. Dwayne and I were joking about this the other day, like weeks in advance. I see fantasy podcasts, and they'll put out, hey, here's our next month of guests. Dwayne and I are like, hey, who do you want to get tomorrow? We're like, let's see who we can find. Like, let's scroll through the Rolodex. And we're like, oh, Ian's a huge name. Speaking of huge names, so you dominate Twitter. And it's really funny because you do it in a way that's so different than everybody else. Because you see so many guys out there and they're like following for a follow. And I hate that. And Twitter is just the most annoying place in the world. Anyways, you have 53,000 followers, yet you don't even follow 1,000 people. So in your grind of, I think, 8 years now doing fantasy football, like how have you amassed this following and you're still just kind of keeping it chill? Like, hey, I'm following these guys. I don't need to follow every, jack off on Twitter just because they follow me back.
So you got to go on like a stupid hot run, making these absurd helicopter picks, and then people just kind of roll in. No, and by the way, that well freaking went dry last year. So we continue to evolve and move on. Man, the big thing with Twitter, I guess that was a turning point for me because, I used to, when I initially got it, I just had it like for my friends. Luckily, I think it was like not until like my freshman or sophomore year of college, I got on Twitter. So I'm pretty sure I haven't said anything too stupid over the years. Knock on wood there. But man, like when I first started really writing, having to, anyone coming up in the industry, you have to just write usually a stupid amount of articles, and a lot of which are things you don't necessarily want to write about and maybe are not getting all that many reads. So, sending out all these articles, and I worked really hard on, and I thought they were good, but also full well knowing that, they weren't getting a lot of visibility. I didn't want the stats that I was coming up with to go to waste. So I just started, as I'm writing articles and researching anything, really just sending out tweets throughout it. So that's the thing, man. I don't necessarily scroll through I mean, okay, like, I'll scroll through Twitter like anyone else, when things get boring and whatnot. But a lot of times, I just kind of tweet as I'm writing, as I'm researching stuff, because that's kind of when the ideas get going. But hey, in my spare time, I usually got football highlights rolling on at least one of the TVs in the room. So the grind never exactly stops with it. But yeah, I don't know, man, just keeping it loose, having fun. I never wanted to box myself exactly into something. So, I guess the one time that I almost got screwed on Twitter was I wanted to be the Wobe, of NFL Twitter, just tweet out all the highlights as they came in, because I figured out a way how to do it, and I thought I could beat, or I was beating the NFL Twitter channel with getting the highlights out. That lasted a fun preseason, and then week one, the NFL comes around, and that Tuesday, the old Twitter account gets suspended. So I've had to adjust to a few things over the years, but man, it's just keeping it fun, and keep it positive. That'd be my biggest thing of advice. Like, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. No one wants to see you, simp for followers or, this and that. But the biggest thing is, like, don't quote tweet the idiots in your mentions. We know they're out there. Just mute them and move on. But when you're giving them now something, you're giving them the attention they want. And anyone that's saying all this bogus to you has bigger problems in their own life that you don't need to really worry about. So that'd be my one piece of advice. Because I know it's frustrating. People can compliment you 10 times, but one person says a negative thing, and that's kind of what sticks out to you. But I would just say the best you can, refrain from engaging back to them, because it's just not really helping anyone.
Yeah, when you have 53,000 followers, we asked Evan Silva about this, and he just kind of was like, yeah, it is what it is. But when you wake up in the morning and you open your phone, the average guy out there has, nobody follows him. Or if you're kind of a low-end fantasy analyst, you've got a few thousand people, but it's all just kind of like analysts following analysts. You have to wake up on a weekend during the NFL season, and it just must be line after line after line of, who do I start? Should I make this trade? Blah, blah, blah. And I know Dwayne gets that also, but it's got to be overwhelming.
It is, man. It's funny when you have a tweet go like kind of viral, and if it's in a bad way, you wake up and all of a sudden you're like, oh, like, wait, what's going on right now? Why is everyone all angry at me? I remember I had a tweet, and all I was saying was that, I did not describe it this well. I basically said, like, why have a running back ever stay in and block? If you send him out on a route, you're either wide open and you can throw it to him, or someone's covering him and, like, you're taking up the guy that you would have ideally had him block had he stayed in the backfield. Didn't spell it out that well, but I think it was Betts, all 22 on Twitter, and he got a hold of it, man. And all of a sudden I had, like Chris Brown, Smart Football, like guys I have looked up to and read for years, just like coming down on me like, oh, I'd love to read your, pass blocking philosophy. And then that's a Saturday morning. I'm just like, what have I done? Like, what is going on? But, it's the, quote unquote worst part about the job. I can deal with it. You put the phone down and you just, smell the candles, and it's not too bad of a thing. So yeah, it's a lot, man, but it's all good. I'm happy with my mentions. I think it's a good time. I still got the DMs open. Everyone's always looking for advice here or there. I'm not timely with all of it, but I try to give back. And Sunday mornings I usually try to just do a quick 20-minute AMA. I used to try to send out some just extra stats on Sunday morning, but I realized, like, okay, people just want their start sit and stuff there. So yeah, man, it's all good. We're all, as long as you're here to talk football, man, that's all I am. I don't really care about much else. So if you're just here to talk ball, good enough for me.
Yeah, I think my tweet that got the most like retweets or whatever like all year was the one week I said something negative about Joe Mixon and he went off.
Oh, that Jaguars game?
Yes.
He did nothing before that.
I know, man. It was crazy. And you're getting the old takes exposed, everybody hashtagging you. It's pretty funny. Yeah. It is funny how it seems like the negative one, though, you do remember like more than all the positive ones, but you're right. Like, you just kind of got to put it out of your head and just focus on putting out good content. And I agree with you, being kind. I can get pretty sharp with people sometimes. So I've been trying to be better about that.
Sometimes. I see good stuff.
I know. Hey, I'm trying. I'm working on it. Yeah. Somebody told me I was condescending, so I'm working on that, Ian.
Yeah, it's all good, man. I got to work on not talking so freaking fast, man. I know I do. People tell me that they got to slow the podcast, like they're usually on 1.25 or 1.5 and got to go down to normal when I'm on there. So I realize it. I'm working on it, everybody. But you know what? I got a lot of shit to say, so it is what it is, eh?
I can't do that. Like, I'm not a guy who listens to podcasts in like 2x speed. Like, I want to sit there and I'm driving for work. I want to hear what these guys are talking about. Like, if I'm listening and 2x time, and I'm hearing, Ian's like, brrr, and Levitan's 1,000 miles an hour. I'm like, I don't know what anybody's talking about right now. Like, I just need to absorb what they're saying.
I go one and a half to 2 for me. Drake, most CEOs listen to it on 2x. So I don't know if you're CEO material, Drake. We'll see.
Says a lot about a guy how fast you listen to your podcast.
You got to get more done, man. You got to get more done.
That's why I've got 11 Twitter followers, and you guys have, half of North America, apparently. I got to ask you this too about PFF. So you started out in the industry. I know you said you got your start with Fantasy Labs, Jonathan Bales, and you've been hustling through a bunch of different sites, Action Network, RotoWorld, which I've got a great thing I want to ask you about. But you get over to PFF and they unlock this data for you. And you're obviously a guy and Dwayne's the same way. So I want to hear both of you guys. When they open this and they go, here you go, kid, have fun, kid in a candy shop, like go crazy. And it's just, oh my God, look at all this crazy information. Like, how do you even dive in? Does somebody help you look through it? Or it's just, they throw the phone book at you and say, go make some sales?
That's the one meeting since I've started at PFF that I made sure to actually really tune in and pay attention for, because I really wanted to see, how to work PFF Ultimate, because I knew the possibilities with it. So, things like health insurance and, 401k, I was like, I'll figure this stuff out later, but tell me how I can use PFF Ultimate. But yeah, for real, man, within a week, they kind of gave it to us, and just pretty much any question you have the tools to look it up. And, people will have issues, with PFF player grades or this stat or that stat. No single stat and good for player grades trying to be the one great stat, but you need to have multiple stats to sum up any information. And if the stats you're pulling aren't matching up with what you're seeing on film, they're probably not good stats, or you're probably not, utilizing it effectively. So, people, I see the hate for this stat or that stat and saying, you need to watch the film. We need to do both. And at least PFF is trying to bridge that gap. If you're saying a player grade is wrong because of, these 2 or 3 stats showing that, and because you see something else, that's one thing. But just to kind of write off, just the data as a whole as something that's not going to help you, I think is a little bit irresponsible. We all need to do a better job deciphering it and continuing to grow the larger sample sizes and everything. But man, just the wealth of data available is absolutely wild. And for college football too, man, that's what's been fun recently. I don't get into it quite as much as others, but man, oh man, the things you're able to check how how Justin Fields, everyone wants to come out and say that the guy is a first read quarterback, and with PFF you're able to go into that and say, well, no, actually he was the highest graded quarterback we had when he was throwing to his first read receivers. I know Dwayne, one of the best articles you could find this past fantasy season was his utilization report, and just the things we were able to talk about on the PFF fantasy pod, just with these backfields and the numbers that you notice in the game, being able to contextualize that, form an article with it. It's been spectacular.
Yeah, I remember. So Ian and I basically started, at PFF at the same time. Him full time, and me, just writing an article once a week. Well, I'll write more, in the preseason, but I remember that day that Austin Gale walked us through PFF Ultimate, and we were asking questions. It's funny because when I logged into that, Drake, for whatever reason, because my daughter had done a Zoom class in here in my office, because that's when COVID had all just started. And so she was staying home from school, and as a kind of popular thing at their school, is Bob Ross, right? The old Channel 13, the public TV painter. And so she, as a joke, had, her name is Bob Ross. So when I logged in, to get on this, they won't let me in. They're asking me, who are you? Who's Bob Ross? I'm like, this is Dwayne. And so they let me in. But what's funny is nobody calls me Dwayne now. Now I'm PFF. I'm Bob Ross. So,
bro, have you seen the UFC fighter whose nickname is Violent Bob Ross?
I haven't. No.
Oh my God. The guy's name is Luis Pena. He has the freaking same afro and everything. Yeah. I remember the first time, Dwayne, we got on a podcast together. That was your name. And I was like, you're Dwayne, right?
Dude, well, I did an interview like that for a job. My wife, same thing with Zoom. So it comes up as my wife's name is Carrie. And all of a sudden it's hey, who's Carrie? Why is this? And I couldn't change it. Unless the host allowed you to change it. So I'm or it said Mrs. Drake, I think. And I'm the hell with it. We're going with it. I got the job. So
Bob Harris says he's the biggest Bob Ross fan, so we'll give
no
that
hate,
to him.
no hate.
Hey, I will say one other thing though. I do remember that when they gave us that data, and I was like Ian, and I was starting a new job at the time, and man, like it's you asked Drake, like how did you dive in? What did you do? Well, at first, like when you have access to all this stuff, like you don't even know what really matters yet. You're trying to figure out like how would I use this for fantasy? What stats, really correlate, right, to things that are valuable to fantasy owners and things like that. And what are the gaps like this data can cover that really isn't being covered elsewhere in the industry? So like, that's the first thing I did. I dove into the questions like that I had that I never could really find the answer for, that I thought, well, now I have all this contextual data they're capturing on every single play, and I have complete access to it. So I figured out how to use the tool like pretty quickly, but it can be overwhelming. Like Ian, like I don't know how much time you've spent in it, but like one of my goals, like before this season gets here again, like is to actually go back in and spend more time like in some different areas. Last year, like you said, I just really focused on the backfields. Like how could we better break down backfield situations? And then as well as some stuff on receivers with the utilization report. And so that was my main focus. But like this year, I've got several other ideas, and I know that data's in there, but you can get lost in it. Like you could easily just be sitting. I know sometimes I would be sitting there looking through it all, and I'll be like, crap, I have to finish writing this article. Like, I can't just keep like reading through all this data.
Bro, and sometimes like you're too like zoomed in, they say you gotta take a step back sometimes to see the whole picture. Like I remember like the first time I messaged Eric Eager, freaking PhD, like our VP of research and development. Super freaking smart. I was just like, hey, bro, like I'm not seeing air yards anywhere. Like how could it, any way we could like get that added? And he's like, average target depth times targets. And I was like, God damn it, I'm a freaking idiot. Like how did I not put that together? So
I was told there would be no math.
Right. Yeah. That's the other thing, man. Like, personally, I'm not one of these guys that's spectacular at R or anything. I need to get better. I took, some statistics courses in college, so I'm not completely oblivious to it, but more than anything, I know how to do some pivot tables and VLOOKUPs in Excel, and just knowing that much has been so crucial for me. So, I feel like, with PFF, and I still love my old guys, Pro Football Reference. They got, if you get their stat finder, you can get stuff back to like, 1970. So with all that, man, I've found over the years, like just, when I watch all the games every single Sunday, usually two at once live, and then, I got kind of the 40-minute condensed version rolling on the laptop, but I'm always just writing questions throughout my Excel sheet. I'm kind of taking notes on throughout that to try to go back and look, and check the stats later. Cause you see someone, Kenny Galladay, you're like, oh wow, this guy is spectacular on contested catches. And all of a sudden you look at the PFF data and, oh, you can actually spell that out. So yeah, certainly can't get too lost in the weeds with it, but yeah, man, I'm Dwayne, man, I know you're pumped too, but another year with this, man, we're going to be breaking all sorts of codes and whatnot this year.
Hey, Ian, real quick, while you're on that topic, because I have people ask me about this quite a bit, like, and I don't even do it every week. I used to, but you literally do watch every game every week. I try to watch as much as I can. But tell people how you do that, because I would have people like, how's that possible? How do you do it? And not that, look, man, if you just love watching football and you love playing fantasy, like, let the analysts, help you out by doing this for you. But if you really want to do it, which I do have people ask me, like, kind of what's your method? Like, what are you looking for? Because it's another thing too, where like you can't be stopping the game, like every few minutes, and you kind of got to be able to you got to get good at doing it like on the fly, right? As the stuff's happening, jotting down your notes, being able to focus on more than one thing. So just tell folks like how you do that.
So make sure that, your girlfriend's family, friends have nothing to say to you for the entirety of Sunday. That's kind of the first thing you got to make pretty clear. But yeah, look, I go 3 TVs. So first of all, I go 2 TVs, games on Red Zone for the 1 o'clock format. So I got 2 games done there. And I got to stay with what's going on with Twitter. So I got to know everything that's going on with Red Zone. 4 o'clock, we'll start 2 more games. So now we got 4 done. And then usually around 4:40 to 5 o'clock, NFL Game Pass, which I pay $100 a year to get, we'll start uploading the condensed versions of it. So for about 2.5 hours, I have 2 live games on, and also my laptop with the condensed game rolling. Look, I will miss a play from here or there. I am not Superman. I can't see exactly what every person is doing with every screen. But the big things I'm looking for throughout all this are the beyond the box score statistics. I've been calling them sheesh alerts usually as I'm kind of going through the games. But yeah,
sheesh.
Yeah, wide receiver X is wide open downfield and the quarterback overthrows him. And just that's why I want to watch all the games, man. So I don't make that mistake where I go, oh, this guy, caught 2 of 8 targets for 30 yards. Like he had a bad game and someone can hit you with well, actually, he was wide open and his quarterback just missed him. So, being able to just kind of know everything that's going on. So, yeah, basically I'm rolling through the condensed games from about 4:40 onwards. And I found – usually by the fourth quarter of the Sunday night game, I kind of have everything set. And, then I take the notes and do the Sunday night PFF Fantasy Pod. So make sure you guys all check out that Monday morning next year. Because, again, just trying to get that, extra. Because anyone, a lot of people watch Red Zone. They're aware of the results going on. And, we are as well. We can read our, fantasy scores and all that. We're on Twitter all day. But, just trying to get eyes on the plays just so, you hear the, oh, no, big miss, and just try to try to catch everything that, those small loose holes that even the best statistics can't catch. The nullified touchdowns and all that. I think that's what makes trying to watch every game so important.
And if you're reading Dwayne's utilization report, say you're a guy who just watches the Red Zone all day, you might not see that, receiver X is on the field for 80% of a quarterback's dropbacks. You might not notice that a certain running back is on the field during their long down and distance snaps. That's why you read Dwayne's article. That's why you listen to Ian's podcast. That's why you use our promo code HUSTLE and you save 25% off all these great stats that we're talking about over at PFF. I know there was a guy in our chat room here asking about the packages. You can get the PFF Edge package, which will get you a ton of great stats. You can't get the ultimate package that the teams and that Dwayne and Ian get access to.
Brian Drake has access to this now.
Trust me.
They gave Brian access. Ian.
Wow.
His head's about
I got to figure that out.
Now I'm just playing.
Now they let any idiot do this. But yeah, folks, use our promo code. Go over there. It's a blast. Trust me. If you're a content creator, and I know there's several who watch this show every single week, it's going to make you a better content creator, and you can move up the ladder. Like a guy like Ian did, like Dwayne did. And one of your first jobs, Ian, was at rotoworld doing blurbs. I have to ask you about doing these blurbs because I've heard you literally have to just never stop watching the news. You have to take your laptop with you to the bathroom. Has anything crazy ever happened to you while you're writing these? You got hammered and been like, F this guy. Like, he sucks. Cut his ass. Drop him.
I think my best one from response was Trubisky averaged 5 yards per attempt. And I tweeted Midwest Bortles averages 5 yards per attempt and lost. And that one got going pretty well. But man, look, I got in on the news game. My first job in Fantasy Labs, I was really running our NFL news, and shout out to the head of Fantasy Labs NBA, Justin Fan. Man, if you guys want anything to do with just, getting those lineups out, hearing about, delays and just getting the most up-to-date DFS basketball news possible, can't recommend those Fantasy Labs guys enough because that was a standard set to me. So, man, when I used to do the Fantasy Labs NFL news page, it was really a much smaller team. I was the only full-time guy on it. And, I took that kind of chip on my shoulder. I wanted to beat RotoWorld in every single freaking blurb and, ideally give better analysis as well. So going to RotoWorld and kind of doing it their way, for me, it was a little bit easier just having 5-6 guys to bump around with it. Far more pressure because I know RotoWorld's blurbs are going to get read far more than anything we were doing before. But yeah, man, go to the bathroom, laptops on the way. It'd be funny, I'd be hanging out with, maybe I'm streaming a fight with friends on, and then, it's midnight at on Saturday when Rap Sheet and Schefter start sending out all the tweets. So everyone's partying. I'm, on my laptop, just kind of typing away and getting things all set up. So no, nothing to, okay. One time I went to a UFC card in Chicago with my guys. One of those days where you wake up and you're like, why am I this hungover? And you actually didn't eat anything the entire previous day. Well, news was calling. I do baseball news back when I was with Fantasy Labs. And man, I remember just in between throwing up, man, looking down and trying to get those lineups submitted on time. So it is a grind. And, when you're on those news teams, you don't really want to because, hey, if you're not doing it, someone else has to do it. So from that point, it was fun with the accountability, but I wouldn't be lying. I would be lying if I said that not having the news anymore was a major selling point for my decision to come to PFF.
I always thought that the blurbs screwed the smart fantasy player because you would have some jackwagon in your league who would be like, no, look at my phone. Like RotoWorld said, hey, because you're probably sitting there drunk, like David Montgomery blows, drop him, who cares? And you're trying to like trade the guy, and they're like, nah, RotoWorld said drop him. Like, I'm not going to trade for this guy. Like, stop telling people what to do in your blurbs. Just say he sucks, he's hurt, whatever. Leave it at that.
It's impossible trying to get a trade done with any of my friends these days. They always just think I'm, trying to absolutely screw them. They'll pull up some like tweet I send, like, well, what about this? And I'm like, no, man, it's you and me. Come on, we're good.
Man, oh man. Hey, you going to the Kings Classic this year? I know you won your division last year, right?
That's right, reigning champ. And I found out last night. Apparently, it's paid for, so I am in. Let's do it or something. Yeah.
You were in like a weird new division. Like I've been out there and we did the draft at the Hall of Fame. It's a blast. And you want to talk about boozing? Like that's 2 nights of good boozing. We got to get Dwayne up there. But you were in like this international bracket. It was like you and Silva and
my Aussie guys.
Yeah, there's guys from our good friends from 5 Yard Rush were in there. But yeah, so you guys had to do it online because obviously there's guys from Africa in there. So
oh man.
Yeah, hopefully they can get you guys out to the Hall of Fame this year. That's a blast. Shout out to Bob Long.
Sorry, I can't remember his name. The fantasy football down under guy. I've gone on his pod. Oh, Lewis. I love that pod. Yeah, if you guys ever want some Aussie football, check out FF_down under. I always love Lewis. And you got to support the Australia. Man, you got to really love football, live in Australia, and be down the pound NFL, in the hours that they have over here. So I always enjoy that part of our weird little shtick we got going on here called Fantasy Twitter. But yeah, man, Kings Classic. Happy to have taken down the snake draft. I did awful. So speaking of drinking a lot during these drafts, I started really picking it up at the end of the snake draft. Did my first ever auction draft was in this Kings Classic thing. And like, I remember bidding for Ezekiel Elliott and like, it was going 55, 56, 57, 58. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I went like 70, like didn't even like stop it. And like, I saw someone like writing it up, like someone wrote like a legit article on the draft. And they were like, Ian Hartitz shocked everybody by going $70 for Zeke. And then I went with Pat Carrain, who's over at Establish the Run, awesome Dynasty guy. But he's a big Ronald Jones truther, and he's been hyping him up. So Ronald Jones gets set, and I was just like, I am not losing Ronald Jones no matter what. And afterwards, Pat was like, yeah, that felt a little personal the way that went down. So I love Pat, but it was just fun to mess around with that. Did not do nearly as well on the auction side, so take that for what it's worth. But Kings Classic, ready to defend that crown.
Oh, that'll be a good time, man. Let's get into a little fantasy. Easy for me to say. Fantasy. Arthego Whiteside. We talked about him before.
See, that's a perfect transition, Drake.
That's where it came from, yes. Speaking of guys you should drop from your fantasy team. Let's play Fantasy Mythbusters. So let me come up with a scenario here that has been generally thought to be a truth in fantasy football. And you tell me, guys, is it still holding water to this day, or can we move on and update? It's 2021. Clear the decks. We'll start, Ian, with you with 0 RB. Is this still a myth that you can forego running backs, just draft wide receivers everywhere in a PPR league, and 0 RB is a way to win fantasy leagues?
I don't know. I don't think you can use 0 RB anymore. I don't like the name. Modified 0 RB, I think, is the way to go. Someone suggested, I think it was Denny Carter, executive RB. Maybe that was what he said, but there's a better name than modified 0 RB. If you're drafting an RB, it's not 0 RB. So let's not talk about modifying something that is not as. So that kind of is one of my pet peeves. But I think that's a strategy. If you want to get your workhorse first down back, one of those top 5 guys on your list, and then go heavy wide receivers, that's great. But man, just going pure, not grabbing anyone for, what if we want to call true 0 RB, probably the first 5-6 rounds at least. I don't know. I just think you're setting yourself up a little bit too much to fail there. There's only, hey, if you're just in a full-on flex league that really rewards, wide receivers more than running backs, I guess maybe there's the right league settings. But to me, get that, bell cow workhorse early and then flank him with plenty of wide receivers. And with that said, for all you 0 RB faithful, though, get Raheem Mostert on your team. I have barely left a best ball draft without him so far. I'm very excited. He's going like close to RB 30, man. I think once Kyle Shanahan, who is not going to take a high-end running back because his family invented this idea that you don't need to do that. We're going to see Mostert pop into that, mid-low RB2 range where he probably should be already.
Mr. McFarland, I've done shows with you for 4 years. I could probably verbatim say what you're going to say, but I'll let you do it.
Yeah, I think every year is different. There have been years where I've used more of a modified or zero or executive zero RB, whichever one we want to call it, Ian. I've had years where I haven't drafted a running back in the first 3 rounds in some of my drafts. But you also have to understand, I draft a ton of teams, so that's part of it as well. But every year it's just different. It depends on where the value is at and where I think I can get assets later in rounds like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that I think are most likely to be able to perform like rounds 4, 3, 2. And so if it is a year where I like what's going on at running back and I have a good feel about some guys that really everybody's not on, or for whatever reason their ADP doesn't skyrocket through the preseason, then I'll do it. But those years are far and few between, right? Typically nowadays, like last year, good grief. Jonathan Taylor was running, in mini camp, running to some dude holding a pad, and he shot up a round, so that sounds pretty bad. Some dude wearing a pad. Anyway, just keep moving, Drake. Don't stop the show.
The wine's flowing. Let's go. I got 3 bottles here. We can. I got a nice Argentinian Malbec here, a single vineyard. If you want to pop this anytime soon.
But yeah, me, Drake. It really depends, and I don't just mean just draft to draft. Typically, it's a seasonal thing, right? So there was a time, right, where you could have gotten Antonio Brown, and turned back around and got another really elite receiver. And I can't remember the last year I did this. I want to say it was like 4 or 5 years ago that I did it and really had success. And then 7 or 8 years ago, I was doing it a lot and I would have success. But over the last few years, it just hasn't played out that way. It just hasn't played out where that's, in my opinion, the smart move. It may have been contrarian, but just because it's contrarian doesn't make it, the smart move. At some point on a contrarian play, the math has to work out for you. And the problem is if you're playing some of the tournaments like I play, where guys will draft 50 to 100 teams, they're trying all sorts of ways to do this. I see guys in there that are just spending money just to draft a team just in a different way that everyone else is, just in case it hits, they can win all this money, right? You see the same thing in DFS. But I think if you're a typical player, right, you may draft 1 or 2 teams in a season, which is typically who we're trying to give advice to. Most people aren't degenerates like us and play on 400 leagues. So I just, I think it's tougher, but we'll see. This year there are some running backs, I don't know if we're getting into it in this show, but there are some backs that I actually really like in the 3rd and 4th rounds this year that I think could end up being like the every down back. Now, they could easily start to move up once the draft happens, especially if their teams don't take another back, which is, I think, the assumption with some of these guys like, James Robinson and Jacksonville. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out. But I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, there's several guys that I think, in the 3rd round give you the same thing of some of the guys being taken in the 2nd round. This year, Joe Mixon at the end of the 2nd round with Giovanni Bernard gone. People think last year, Mixon was the end of a 1st round pick. I don't even care if you don't like Joe Mixon very much. He's going to get the ball all the time, unless they draft a back to take on the passing downs. And we know Joe Mixon can be a good pass catcher because we've seen him do it before. We've seen him do it in college. So just by the sheer fact of those things, Joe Mixon's underpriced. He's going to get the ball more than Nick Chubb. And
they're taking that Memphis kid. 100%. They're going to take that kid out of Memphis and he's going to catch 60 balls next year.
Gamewell?
Hey, they may do that. You could be exactly right. So look, we just have to see how it plays out. But if some of those things work out, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire could easily, grow in his 2nd year, and you get him for way less than Jonathan Taylor, who goes in the middle of the 1st. So you just have to think through some of those things.
Yeah.
Our pal John Dagg, who we should just get on the show right now anyways, if I had a 4-box screen, says everyone tries to corner themselves from the beginning. Just enter every draft open-minded.
Just like John Daigle and I do every Friday over at rotoworld, 6 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it.
Is it Edge now? What's the name, John? I know
always rotoworld to me. Rotoworld used to sign my checks. That's who they'll remain.
Let's talk about our next topic, and it's going to be punt tight end. If you don't get a stud tight end, Ian, and we're talking Kittle, Kelsey, Waller, are you just saying the hell with it? I'll find somebody in the double-digit rounds, or is there value outside of that? If you're taking a guy, maybe a Hawkinson or, people are going to be high on Kyle Pitts this year. Your article obviously touched on some tight ends. It's very, very difficult for a rookie tight end to come in and do anything. So if you don't get those elite guys, are you punting till the end, or can you get value and can you hit on one of those mid-tier tight ends?
It's tough, man. I'm usually team get, one of Kelsey, Kittle, or Waller and be happy you got them. And then, just live to play another day in round 14 or something like that. Because the amount of best ball teams I sacrificed to the likes of Chris Herndon, Jay Sternberger, Blake Jarwin, man.
Herndon.
Oh, my God. Hey, Gase is gone. We'll see what happens in 2021. But,
he was our guy.
Chris Herndon.
Yes, he was. But, man, just with the position, the longer the offseason goes on, the more we can kind of talk ourselves into some of these guys. So maybe I'm once again making the same mistake, but I just think that there's not this huge discrepancy between, tight end 10 and tight end 18. Like I understand, like Hawkinson's my tight end 4. Great. If you can get him at a reasonable spot, then that's fine. Everyone's a value at the right ADP, but I'm just not finding myself after those top 3 reaching on anyone, because as great as Hawkinson might be, I don't know, man. Goff's going to be there. They're going to draft a couple guys. It's a big projection to assume he's going to take that leap and be the number 1 pass catcher. And as for Kyle Pitts, like I am confident he's going to become the third Evan Ingram, Rob Gronkowski, probably Kyle Pitts, top 12 rookie tight ends over the past decade. Like, wild how hard it is for these guys, because I think he's a number 1 pass catcher. I think he's just a receiver that we happen to call a tight end. And if he was smart, which I'm not saying he's not smart, please don't hurt me, Kyle Pitts, but, say you're a wide receiver, just get paid more money. It doesn't make sense to me why tight ends are, paid so much less than wide receivers. You understand why Jimmy Graham threw such a fit about this, trying to get franchise tagged differently with the Saints back in the day a little bit. So, yeah, man, I would say fade those, kind of the middle pack, because just a lot of those guys, we're pricing them closer to their ceiling. Like even Dallas Goedert, who I think is a fantastic talent, like Zach Ertz is still there for some reason. I keep hearing the trade rumors, like when's that going to happen? So, Noah Fant, great player, very crowded offense. Robert Tonyan, the poster child for regression, because how could anybody possibly be that efficient again unless you're AJ freaking Brown? So, man, it's just a lot of these guys, like I see the case for and against, and I see the case for and against from like tight end 8 to tight end 18.
Dwayne, your rebuttal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Ian's right. I will say that this year is really the year, and I know people say this every year. Oh man, tight end looks really great this year, and usually I'm the one to disagree, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think that and Ian's already hit on some of these guys. And I'm not going to be forcing it with any of them, but I do think this is a year where we could get, a couple of these younger guys that get to take the next step up, because, they're growing, they're developing. We know it takes tight ends longer to adjust to the NFL. Some of it has to do with, if they can step up and, garner more attention, they've got less, targets to go around, right? Less targets that they have to share on some of these offenses potentially, because they could be the top pass catcher. But I mean, Hawkinson's a guy that, could still be an ascending talent, but he is, already being priced in higher. I think the guys that I like that I think are being priced lower based on their ADP right now, Drake, are Irv Smith, Higbee. Goddard obviously would get into that mix, right, if Zach Ertz was gone, but like Ian just said, he's not. And then like your late round dart is like, Adam Troutman. Like Kyle Pitts, man, it's crazy. Like I just saw him go in an FFPC draft, which is 1.5 per catch per reception for tight end. Like I think he went in like the 6th or 7th round today. And I think he's gone like in the 5th round in some of these. And this is before he's even on a team, before we even really have a real narrative to run with. So it's going to be really interesting, but I do think this is one of those years where out of that group we just talked about, somebody's probably going to step up, and the next year it's going to be like, oh man, they're in the top 3 or 4, right? They're going to be in that same conversation. I think there's a good chance of that, just because these are young, really talented guys.
I like your guy Blake Jarwin. If you're going to wait all the way till the end, he would have had a really nice season last year. I think if he didn't get hurt, see what he can do in the red zone. Let's move on to waiting on quarterbacks. So everyone likes to say, in fantasy, wait on QB, just wait forever. Give me the 55th ranked quarterback and I'll win because I'll have every other position locked up. But we've seen now with these Konami code rushing quarterbacks, these guys who can win you weeks, but rushing for 100 yards, scoring a touchdown on the ground, throwing for 250 yards and a few scores. That's a massive difference from taking Matt Ryan in round 12, who is probably going to, lose 40 yards rushing from sack yards. And, what if he doesn't throw 3 touchdowns that week? Now you're screwed. So Ian, let's start with you. Waiting on a quarterback, still a myth or is it a myth in fantasy football, or is that still a real thing?
I think it's becoming a myth. I'm still not taking Mahomes or Lamar Jackson in round 3, but more and more, particularly in best ball drafts. I mean, if round 8 or 9 is going past and you still don't have a quarterback, you better have a right target that you're going to get, because it can get scary pretty fast. There have been some interesting opportunities, though. One thing I've been experimenting with in some best ball squads is getting both Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. And before you yell at me, Ian, how could you do that? You're limiting your team's upside because both of them won't have great seasons. Like when it's a 14th and an 18th round pick, I think that's a little different than first and a 10th. Like it's not like I'm taking Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard here, and Taysom Hill is just a freaking big enough weirdo to actually maybe give us a couple usable weeks even after Jameis wins the job. So unique situation there. You can build the rookie QBs are cheap enough, Zach Wilson, like there's some cases to be made, but yeah, I was trying to scan the Twitter because I feel like I sent something out not too long ago looking at like the most fantasy points per game just in seasons from QBs. Like we're just seeing more and more recent years stacking up because the game's different than it's ever been before. So we better keep evolving the strategy. So yeah, I mean, looking at our top kind of 10 quarterbacks, I mean, the only kind of quote unquote statue these days is Aaron Rodgers, who's fresh off throwing 45 touchdowns. I know he's not a statue, but he just doesn't rack up rushing yards. Like we just have more fantasy friendly quarterbacks in 2021 than we did in 2015 and whatever year you want to take before it. So yeah, more and more, like I'm not against spending a pick in rounds kind of 6 through 8 to secure a stud if he happens to be there, similar to I guess tight end, in that I'm not forcing the issue or anything. I think our guy John Dagg made a good point. Enter every draft open-minded, be ready to adjust on the fly. But just in general, yeah, I think in today's NFL, with hitting, like quarterbacks are kept safer than ever. Like we see it, and guys like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. I mean, it's a myth that scrambling quarterbacks get hurt more than pocket passers. Dr. Edwin Porras over at Fantasy Points has done great research on this show, and it makes sense, man. Like, why would a quarterback that's okay, like if you're RG3 and don't know how to slide, like that's a weird exception that could be an issue. But if you're really athletic, like you can avoid these big hits. You're not standing in the pocket with these freakish defensive linemen teeing off on you at all angles. So I think just the way football is set up now, it's so much more doable for these rushing QBs. And as we see with receiving RBs, man, if you can be a dual threat, producer in fantasy football, whether you're the receiving RB, rushing QB, even our Bobby Woods and Curtis Samuels of the world out wide receiver getting the rush attempts, it ends up being a cheat code more times than not. So yeah, I'm I think the godfather of a late round QB, JJ, has even softened his stance a little bit in recent years on it. So continue to adjust, because the OG late rounder is, I believe, hopefully I'm not misquoting him, but I think that's the case.
Yeah, winner of podcast of the year from the FSWA.
Hey.
Not that we were ever nominated, and we weren't super bitter, but we kind of were. But next year we'll get nominated for that. Dwayne, what do you think? Waiting on a QB or no?
I think Ian did a real good job of just painting the landscape on this one. I mean, it's things are just evolving, and I think you're seeing fantasy players evolve with it. I don't feel like there's this big gap in knowledge, at least based off of the interactions, that I have on Twitter and the things that I read. I feel like, overall the average fantasy player is kind of tuned into this, and that, folks aren't just being, super hard-headed about, you can just wait. I think if you look at the research, some of the biggest hits, right, as far as late round quarterbacks go recently, were really because, you had some of these young quarterbacks with legs that were able to emerge. So 2 years ago, you had Lamar Jackson. Last year, you had Josh Allen, who all of a sudden, they just decided they were never going to run the ball unless it was Josh Allen. And otherwise, they were going to be throwing the ball. So it was just the greatest fantasy football situation ever, right, for a guy like Josh Allen. And then the year before, obviously Pat Mahomes did most of his damage through the air, but he can still rack up yardage on the ground. I think what we have now is, I think we really, we always talk about tiers, but man, there really are some lines in the tiers now. Whereas before, how you get out of certain tiers and you start getting down and they kind of all start to blend. Like there's really a cutoff of where you get to the point to where guys that can still give you added, benefit on the ground versus the guys who can't. right? And I think, once you get to that line and you get to all the older guys, your Ben Roethlisbergers, your Tom Brady's, and don't get me wrong, Brady was still fine. Like you could have, depending on how you drafted your team, you could have done fine with Brady last year. But what did Brady finish as last year when he threw for, over 40 touchdowns, over 4,500 yards, and he was still QB what? I can't even remember what he finished, but he wasn't in the top 6 quarterbacks, was he?
I'm checking right now.
But even if that's close, right, that tells you
QB7, nailed it.
so think, that's a lot of passing yards and touchdowns to even have a chance to keep up with some of these other guys. So there's definitely a tier. So I think we're going to just have to see how it plays out this year in the draft. Like I haven't been able to settle on anyone yet that I feel like could give you that upside, but still later rounds. It would have been Jalen Hurts, but really that cat's been out of the bag for 6, 7, 8 weeks now. And especially when they moved down in the draft, like that cemented it, right? It was from then on, it was for sure Jalen Hurts is going to be locked in. Because when the offseason started, what I hoped was maybe Hurts will be this year's Lamar Jackson or even Josh Allen. Even if I got to take him in the 9th or 10th round, I could still stomach it. But, it just keeps creeping up and up and up. And we'll see what happens once, draft season gets here. But I have a feeling this year is going to be the year where, unless you're going to get a rookie, that could be the other option, right? Mm-hmm. Or even I wouldn't trust it as much with Burrow because he's coming off of surgery. But, sometimes your younger quarterbacks that even aren't necessarily known for rushing, right, in their younger years can give you some added benefit there. But I think a guy like Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, maybe they get in play. We'll see exactly where they land and how things look, for those guys. But I think it's getting trickier, man. It's getting trickier and trickier to be able to. I think people are pretty savvy. I think seeing how much Jalen Hurts is moving up shows you how savvy the community is on this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people still overlook a guy like Herbert in LA. And that's a guy who just had a phenomenal season. And, we here at the Hustle, we want to help educate the casual fan. I think in fantasy a lot, podcasts and Twitter guys and whoever, they kind of lose sight of who we're really trying to help. And that's that casual consumer. Everyone gets hyped up on I can get all my fantasy writer buddies to geek out over my content. But really, if you're here helping that casual fan in a casual fantasy league, you're drafting in a garage with your old college buddies. It's impossible to trade a quarterback. So if you have, hey, I drafted, Jalen Hurts, you're never going to be able to trade him because the guy's going to be I can get so-and-so off the waiver wire. So you really got to hit, the guy you want. Otherwise, you're going to be scraping that wire because there's no way you're going to be able to trade and go get Lamar or unless it's some crazy guy throwing it up at the end of the season. But, let me ask you, Dwayne, you brought this up to me as something that I know you don't really believe anymore. So we'll start with you. And it's regards buying low and selling high. We've heard that for years in fantasy football, and everyone goes, oh, you got to buy low on this guy. And then when his value goes up, you sell high. And that's the only way to play fantasy and to make trades. But, what idiot is selling you, besides me, to my friend before week 1, James Robinson for Cam Newton? That doesn't happen without super moronic owners like myself, So buying low, selling high, Dwayne, is this still a legit thing in fantasy football, or is it a myth?
Yeah, and this is really directed more towards dynasty football. But I think, I don't think it's a complete myth, right? I think, there are windows, right, in players' careers, and depending on where your roster build is for your dynasty team and kind of what your window looks. And don't ever tell me you're building for 5 years. Nothing works for 5 years. Companies shouldn't even be planning 5 years ahead. Plan, 1, 2, 3 years ahead at the most, really 1 or 2 years, in dynasty is the way I think about it. You can try to stash up picks and all that kind of stuff you want, but really what my point was here, if you've got a guy that busts out early, right, the odds are, right, they're gonna be a bust. And so if you can still get something out of them and you can get out from under them, just do it. Right. And that's the main thing that I see people do. They just get so tied into, I drafted this guy. Yeah, you did draft him. And he was a first-round pick when you drafted him, but you could get a second-round pick for him right now and get something out of it where he's going to be worth a fifth-round pick next year or a seventh-round pick. Now, some of these guys, every situation is different. If it's due to injury, right? You got to take that differently. It's a first round pick, of a team, and he got hurt and he misses his rookie season. Obviously, he gets a little bit of a pass. I'm talking about, the receiver that we expect to come in and do something absolutely does nothing. Now, again, you've got to grade all these guys against what the bar is, right? What should a typical rookie receiver do? What kind of competition were they facing in camp? Did they just get to come in and basically it was like, hey, we have nobody. You're immediately a starting receiver. We're going to force feed you as much as we can, no matter what. The guy still has to get open and earn his targets, right? That's still the bottom line. But I think people just get too hung up, right, on thinking that, and it's the same thing, like really in the stock market. Like if you talk to the smartest people, like in stocks, Drake, people will still buy for value, but typically when they know the value is going to be good is once the stock is already turned around and it's going up. Like the best stock market investors don't buy crap while it's still dropping. They don't do that. They wait to see, is it going to hit some sort of line of resistance, and then it's going to start a positive trend again. And while that person now all of a sudden is thinking, holy crap, I have this big pile of steaming crap, that's when you jump in and go buy that kind of player, right? Because now they're flashing this different signal, which is literally a buy signal. I think there's so much like to learn from stocks and the stock market and these different things that we can apply, like really to Dynasty Football. Jordan McNamara actually does a really good job with that, right? In the analytics of Dynasty and the book that he does. Drew O on Twitter, he also does a really good job of that. Like he's the fantasy bean counter. So you guys know he counts his beans, right? But he talks a lot about this stuff. And he's got it all broken down to a science more than me and what I track now today. Peter Howard's another one, but where they talk about what the percentage of these guys being able to hit, once they start to fizzle, right? And what does that mean? And then the opposite can be true. So I want to buy stocks that are really good, right? So I want to buy players that are really good. And if that means I have to pay a little bit more to get true studs, now you have to be careful. You can't sell the farm where literally in Dynasty, then you've got no picks for like the next 3 years. But man, if you can trade picks for proven players because people are just all hyped up about the draft and they're, players that you think are still, in their prime, absolutely, man. I do it every time because go back and look at your Dynasty drafts and really be honest with yourself and look at how many people we miss on. And these are the so-called experts, people who spend all their time looking at this stuff. So when you can get a proven, commodity that's still in their prime, I'm not saying go draft some 33-year-old old dude, right? I'm saying, you can find a player, that's 25 years old, that's having a really good start to their career, but for whatever reason, somebody else is super juiced up about Kyle Pitts. Okay, great. Like I'll make the move like all day long. So that's really what I mean in Dynasty is just, be willing to pay for the really good players. And I'm even willing to overpay a little bit. One thing I learned like Sigmund Bloom a long time ago, like when I first started listening to the football guys and really getting into football podcasts, he said something that always stuck with me. He's like, get the best player in the trade. Like that's your goal. Get the best player in the trade. If you've got these multi-player trades, like you're just trying to come out of that trade with the absolute best player in that deal. And so it's kind of a similar, right, philosophy. So I'm willing to pay more for players that I know that are really good. Like I will overpay for Patrick Mahomes, right? I'll overpay, especially at positions where they have a long life. I will overpay for an awesome receiver. Like I'll overpay right now for Justin Jefferson, right? He's still got a chance that he could bust, but the odds are pretty good that he's going to keep on going because he was a first round pick. He was good in college and now he was a stud in his first year in the league. Like odds are pretty good. Like that stock is pointing like straight up. Could it all of a sudden tank? Yeah, but all the buy signals are really good. So I'm willing to overpay for, assets like that.
We have a t-shirt out. If you go to @FF Hustle, our show Twitter handle, and it's the Tombstone logo and it says Analytical Assassin for Dwayne. I think we're gonna have to change it now to like the fantasy stock guy because now every week we get a stock tip from Dwayne thrown in here. Ian, anything to add to that?
I think Dwayne nailed it from a longer term perspective. I would just say, Dwayne and I would talk about this, early on in the season, but try to take advantage of when guys have these outlier games when you have a multi-week example that the volume isn't really what they're performing at. Josh Jacobs, last 2 seasons, they have the week 1 game where they get positive game script. He scores multiple touchdowns, and then we find out, oh yeah, they're still not going to throw him the ball. More true than ever with Kenyon Drake there. So just kind of when you have these situations where ideal game script comes for a committee back and it kind of heightens up his value. Okay, every once in a while, Aaron Jones will score 18 touchdowns anyway and screw you. But a lot of the other time you can kind of get out from underneath one of those potential duds early on. Same thing at wide receiver. I mean, Dwayne, I know one of your calls was to get out from Beckham after the Cowboys game, and I know it worked out because of the injury, but even without that, I think we had enough evidence to know that this was going to be a boomer bust volatile player that you could sell at a much higher value than that, just because of his, primetime performance against the Cowboys. It wasn't primetime, but, everyone was watching that game. You guys know what I mean. Make sure you pay attention to that volume, because that's what we can project most confidently at the end of the day. Whether, the talent can be undone by a coach with a grudge, or, just someone not showing up that day. They got a hangover and they don't perform. Like, ultimately, we want to follow opportunity and volume. That's the best thing we can track. So when, overwhelming public consensus is kind of swinging against what the volume is telling you, that's a good time to act.
Ian did a fantastic article at PFF.com called "What Draft Capital Tells Us About Rookies in Fantasy Football." And, please go over, use our promo code HUSTLE and get 25% off and read it. Really what it comes down to, Ian, I'd love you to just kind of give us a summation of this, is, wide receivers and quarterbacks, they're not as likely in their first year to really go off. Running backs, though, can, and we've got a few teams that are going to need running backs. So I want to talk about who you would love to see fall to a team, let's say the Jets, the Steelers, the Falcons, because those guys are going to instantly become fantasy assets.
Yeah, so real quick on the article, I just looked at the number of rookies, QBs top 12, running backs, wide receiver top 24, tight ends top 12 as well, to finish in those spots as rookies since 2010. And in general, people, top 3 rounds, and you're going to have exceptions otherwise, but they are few and far between for every single position. I mean, tight ends, we'll talk about Kyle Pitts later if we want to. We already have a little bit, but he's an exception. Like, it's been Evan Ingram, and he benefited from OBJ playing 4 games, and Rob Gronkowski, arguably the greatest tight end ever. That's it to be top 12 tight ends. The quarterbacks have almost exclusively been guys with rushing floors. Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, RG3, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray. Finally, Justin Herbert. All those guys before I'd average at least 25 rushing yards per game in college, and them week 1 starters. As we saw with Justin Herbert, I mean, he had the rushing ability. He didn't really show it off at Oregon, started in week 2 instead of week 1. So it makes sense he got in there. And it doesn't mean that, other guys haven't been successful in shorter stints, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, just Deshaun Watson. But to kind of get that over the whole season, more times than not, if you're a quarterback, you do need to get that week 1 start. So, I certainly think Trevor Lawrence, who is at 24 rushing yards per game at Clemson, he should be just fine. He's my QB 13 right now, with that Jacksonville job stacked up. I'm not quite so bullish on Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. I think if they can get, starting jobs sooner rather than later, look the hell out because of their rushing ability. But in today's NFL, for a rookie specifically, man, if you can't run, it's just going to be a hard time. You got to freaking learn how to read NFL defenses. Like, it's hard to expect a rookie QB to be that advanced as a passer. Need to have that, Konami, whatever we're calling it, code rushing ability more than ever. With running backs, really not that big of a difference in, terms of first, second, or third round. There's been 10 first-round backs finished top 24, 8 second round, and 6 third round. So we've seen a bunch of them. It's funny, the ones that have been the exceptions, and we've had 7 of them that have been round 4 or beyond: Roy Halou, Alfred Morris, Zach Stacy, Jordan Howard, Philip Lindsay, and most recently James Robinson. Like, people, quit saying someone is the next James Robinson. There's been one James Robinson for the last freaking decade in terms of like an actual RB1 that was undrafted. Like, it's rare as hell. And, it's one of these things where it is just so landing spot dependent. Robinson benefited from Leonard Fournette getting released. Lindsay had CJ Anderson leave town. Jordan Howard had Matt Forte leave town. Zach Stacy had Steven Jackson leave town. Alfred Morris and Roy Halou had a Shanahan coaching them. So, again, Jets, Falcons, Steelers, I'm with you. And if Shanahan decides to take someone early, which I highly doubt he will, then, maybe we can get behind them. So those are usually the 2 rule of thumbs with the running backs. And, similar thoughts on the wide receivers. Only Tyreek Hill and the Tampa Bay version of Mike Williams have finished top 24. Look, the class last year was awesome. We actually had each of Justin Jefferson, Chase Claypool, and CeeDee Lamb crack that top 24 when it was all said and done. Just realize, and you were saying this, Drake, but there's been 16 wide receivers qualify, 30 running backs. So it can take, a year or two for these wide receivers to fully develop, get in the offense, kind of take over that target share. Running backs, we know they're ticking time bombs in terms of their career. I think NFL franchises get that as well. They're trying to get their investment as fast as possible. So I know we love our prospects right now. We spend 3 months talking about these rookies, but as Dwayne was saying, like going out for proven guys, use that to your advantage and realize that when someone has, a Khalil Herbert of the world, not that he won't work out, but we don't know if someone's valuing someone as a sure thing already and draft hasn't even started yet. Just kind of think twice about that, because as much as we might love someone, as much as we might be right, they get picked in round 5 to a team with a loaded depth chart where they want to play, it's probably not going to work out.
Right. Everyone loves James Robinson until Travis Etienne gets drafted there at the start of the second round. And then it's like, right. Oh, sorry. Good luck with those shares. Let me ask you guys, do you have any fits or just kind of wishes for players that you've studied here in 2021? Like, do you have a guy and you go like, God, I hope he lands on this team?
Dwayne, go ahead.
Yeah, man. So if Trey Sermon does slide, man, I would love to see him with the 49ers. Obviously, there's not many people saying Sermon's going to be, an early pick. So he's a guy that we know Matt Waldman loves. There's some other analysts that we've talked with that really like him as well. So like he's a guy like I would love to see the 49ers and like I agree with Ian. I doubt they're going to spend an early pick. So it'd have to be somebody like that, right? That we like, but there's a chance they slide, to the 3rd, 4th round where maybe the 49ers pull a trigger on them, then man, if that happened, like the world would go, that'd probably be the most nuts like I would ever go over, like a 4th round pick, like as if Trey Sermon landed with the 49ers. Of course, then Shanahan would just put him in a committee and drive us all insane. So that's the big one. Drake, I do, on the receiver side, it's really just about where there's opportunity, and I do like thinking about, what is the quarterback situation like? So the Bengals, obviously, Burrow definitely flashed for us last year. He ended up getting hurt. That was, unfortunate for him, but we've got T Higgins, we've got Tyler Boyd there. I wouldn't mind seeing, another weapon, for Joe Burrow. The Lions obviously have a lot of room for someone. I can't really tell you what Jared Goff's going to be, able to do going forward. But I mean, he's operated an NFL offense before that did have 3 receivers that were in the top 36 multiple times. So, a lot of that will depend on the scheme and what they can get out of Goff. But I think there's, obviously an opportunity there. And I think your Eagles, Drake, like that's another one where I just want to see them give Hurts, another weapon. And I know if it doesn't work out this year, they can hit reset. They'll have a high pick next year. They can draft another quarterback. But I'd like to see the Eagles, add somebody. And then, lastly at receiver, I mean, this is the one everybody says, right? So it's kind of like beating a dead horse. It's really 2 teams, but it's the Packers. Everybody's like, come on, give Aaron Rodgers another receiver guy. Don't draft like another fullback and a 4th tight end. Let's give this guy another receiver. And then the Chiefs, man, because I'm concerned about Mecole Hardman. I think he is a game. I think he's a game changer. Like he can get on the field and he can be an X factor at any time. He can stretch the field. He makes the safeties have to. I mean, when you have Tyreek Hill and Hardman on the field and then Kelsey underneath, obviously that's a lot to deal with. But I think the team has issues with him because he's just not, you can't use him all the time because he's a liability in the run game, right? So he's not very good at blocking, in the running game. He's still adapting. You do have to remember with Hardman, I mean, he was literally a DB all the way up until his last year. And then he's still learning how to be a receiver. So I don't want to count him out too far, right? He does get to play with Mahomes, but I would love to see the Chiefs, get another receiver as well. I mean, so those are all obvious landing spots. I'm sure, Ian might have some others that are a little bit more sneaky than that.
Yeah, I think the Titans are kind of one of these teams too, where you just look at the available targets kind of on hand and, they can Titans are kind of with I treat them like the Seahawks and kind of the Vikings too, where it's like you guys can talk about wanting to be a run first offense all you want. Look at that defense. I don't think you're going to be able to stay in too many games with that sort of attitude. So it's funny. I wrote down 4 fits though going in this, and Dwayne, I had Trey Sermon as my 1 running back. I'm with you on that. RB4 of this class behind the big 3. I said Jets, but in my opinion, Jets, Steelers, Falcons, and the 49ers are the top 4 landing spots for a running back. So I'm not going to sit here and say that their scheme would fit him so specifically and perfectly because of his running style and this or that. I think the dude's a baller. And as an Ohio State fan, I mean, look, those were not easy yards he picked up, when he was showing out at the end of the year. Dude can break all sorts of tackles. He has, 3 down size. I know he hasn't shown pure, high-end receiving ability, but how many college offenses really throw to their running backs? He's looked capable enough, and if someone wants to ask him to do that part of the game, I think like a James Robinson, he can handle it even if he isn't, exceptional at it. Jonathan Taylor as well. Like, there's only, we got our Ronald Joneses of the world that just cannot catch anything, but I like to think a lot of, NFL athlete running backs have at least decent hands, so I think Sermon fits that build. One of my late round guys, and have a, episode of the PFF Fantasy Pod coming out tomorrow where I talk about this too, but Nico Collins, man, is standing out to me, and shout out PFF's Jared Evans for kind of bringing to my attention, but this guy just has all the tools, man. I was looking at trying to figure out who the 5 tool receivers are in this class. It's pretty much Kyle Pitts, because all your wide receivers anyone will have in the top 5 or 6 at the position, they're just all really small guys. It's a class that's full of the slots, and maybe my mind is still too obsessed with those early 2010s AJ Greens, Des Bryants, the big bodied alpha that can just take over games. But to me, Nico Collins, man, could be that 6'4", 215. Okay, he didn't put up huge numbers in Michigan, but what wide receivers do we see do that? I thought Donovan Peoples-Jones looked pretty damn good last year. We wouldn't have really known that from what he did with the Wolverines. So seeing him have 79 percentile 3 cones, 74 percentile vertical, I saw some of the explosiveness that we were missing in his playmaking and route running ability. So if we're going to project someone to really take that next step forward in the NFL, I would at least like it to be a super athlete, and it seems like Nico Collins has that. So put him on the Lions, give him some of those 300 plus available targets they have. They got to go to somebody. Final 2 notes: Justin Fields to the Broncos, I think, is the best 2021 landing spot. Long-term 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, and maybe I'm being Mark just thinking that they wouldn't trade Jimmy G, if they draft Fields. So, okay, 49ers, Broncos, we can have a conversation about that, but man, Sutton, Judy, Hamler, Fant, even our guy Albert O, that would just be fantastic with Fields. And obviously, as much as I am a Drew Lock apologist, that is, your easiest situation to take over in the entire league. And the last note, I think, man, Bengals, Jamar Chase makes a lot of sense. I kind of think Pitts might go to the Falcons just ahead of them anyway. But Kyle Pitts, the Bengals, man, I would just love, because I was just thinking today. All right, so this goes a lot of directions for me. I love Auden Tate, one of my guys I stand for. Theoretically, Kyle Pitts going to the Bengals, Auden Tate could be the number 4 receiving option, go get a couple targets per game. But dude, the amount of targets CJ Uzomah was getting to start the year, and even Drew Sample, like we got to make all those small sample size jokes in our articles that nobody was reading. Like, give Burrow Kyle Pitts, man, and that shit could be a whole lot of fun. So yeah, maybe the more responsible thing is taking the tackle and all that. But man, like, I think Burrow, I can already put Burrow kind of in that Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson conversation. I feel like, just in terms of like, give them one sick tight end that you don't rotate, and I think that dude's scoring 10 touchdowns a year.
Yeah, I think we oftentimes overthink the NFL draft, and we don't kind of just take a step back and look at it from a practical standpoint and go, if Sewell goes to the Bengals, we can kind of look back and go, oh my God, why didn't they take Chase? Why didn't they take Pitts? And then you go, well, their offensive line is abysmal. Like, they need offensive line help for Burrow, and now they take this guy. The Falcons, everyone goes, oh, the Falcons at 4, they could take Pitts, blah, blah, blah. The Falcons defense is horrendous. They should trade down, get more picks, and because you're not getting rid of Matt Ryan for another 2 years based on his contract. Let's go and trade down, get picks, and now we'll get some defenders. And, somebody's going to come up there, and I think it's going to be all quarterbacks. You're going to see, I think, Carolina try to get up in there. I think Washington could try to get in there, and the Patriots. And one of the last things I want to talk to you guys about, and it was a tweet from our good pal Jay Moyer. And I know you retweeted it, Ian. And
he nailed it. This is fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Jay Moyer, we got to have Jay on the show again. He's been on a few times. And his quote, and follow him at Jay Moyer FB. He goes, here's a way to think about it. If Mac Jones doesn't master the cognitive side like Breeze, Brady, Manning, he busts. If Fields does, he's a top 3 QB in the league. And I thought that was just a really fun way to look at Fields and how dynamic he is, because people are like, oh, Mac Jones, he's going to go 3. And I look at him, and I even put kind of Zach Wilson in the same thing. I go, what's so special about Mac Jones? Where's his upside? And you know, they're not going to trade up to get Mac freaking Jones. I mean, give me a break. That's not happening. You want someone dynamic. You could get Mac Jones at 8 or 9 or 10. You don't have to go up to 3 to get him, but that's just my thoughts and who am I. But any final thoughts, guys, on, you know, Mac Jones or Wilson or any of these quarterbacks? Because we know that's going to dominate the first half of the draft.
Real quick, like, you know, we talk about these teams wanting to have the rookie QB window. I think we have pretty good evidence, and maybe I'm missing someone here. I'm trying to scan through the teams, but look at what pocket quarterbacks are good and really successful. Big Ben, Rivers, Brady, you know, even Derek Carr. Like, he led a top 10 scoring offense last year, even if you want to, you know, hold past events against him. Like, you don't see young pocket strapped quarterbacks absolutely balling out. It takes, you know, a half a decade plus to get going. Matt Ryan, you know, all these guys like Drew Brees, they didn't come out just absolutely balling. So you're not even really getting the competitive advantage that you should have with a first round rookie QB, with a quarterback on a rookie contract. You're not getting that with someone like Mac Jones, because it's taken so long to develop them in the first place that by the time they're ready to play, you got to pay them like the guy you want them to be. So couldn't agree more. I thought it was a great point by Jay Moore, and man, it applies in fantasy like 10 times more so even than real life. So, you know, look, I've always been a bit of a sucker for, you know, the off script magicians and all that, you know, like Carson Wentz. You know, okay, he was terrible last year, but I kept thinking he would break out of it because he is so good sometimes, like for a play or two. It's why I'm not giving up on Drew Lock, because as many mistakes as he makes, you will see him, you know, just throw a rocket, you know, off platform, you know, with a guy draped over him, you know, on a dime. But then you see someone like Phillip Rivers, who checks the play before, realizes what the defense is in, enables Jonathan Taylor to run a swing route, catch a ball, and run 40 yards untouched to the end zone, man. So it's one of those things that I don't think we can quite, you know, we don't know what the quarterbacks are barking about, the line of scrimmage changing the plays. It's something that we can't measure, and because of that, we don't probably put enough stock behind. But I think that's what you're hoping for. And yeah, again, to Jay Moyer's point, like, not only would he need to kind of master that cognitive side to really pay off, but he would need to do it awfully quick as well. So yeah, man, Fields for sure QB2 for me. And hey guys, if he goes to San Fran or Denver, man, I'm putting him QB1 ahead of Lawrence in Fantasyland.
My big bold prediction for the draft: Jimmy G is traded to the Patriots on draft night.
Nice. Love it.
Yep. Patriots can't go up and get the guy they want. San Francisco obviously gets their man. Jimmy G's on the move.
Yeah, the latest word today is apparently everybody after Atlanta just wants to trade down. Like, that's every news blurb I've seen. Like, they're willing to trade down. 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 Except for Dallas. I haven't heard that from Dallas, but you've heard that from Carolina, Detroit. I think not Cincinnati. I haven't heard that from them, but yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I'm with Ian. Like, I think Fields is the guy, man. I would love to see him as a 49er. I think the Broncos would be, you know, another great, you know, landing spot. You know, heck, I wouldn't be, you know, mad if he landed in Carolina. You know, I mean, I think, you know, I like what they're doing with their offense. You know, I wish they still had Curtis Samuel there kind of as the third guy, but still Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. You know, and I like the style of offense they run. McCaffrey is a weapon out of the backfield, you know, and they could still add to that. So I wouldn't be against that either. But yeah, man, Denver and San Fran are just, you know, they're stacked.
100%. When I was writing about best potential landing spots, it was those final 3. Panthers got Darnold. They seem like they're committing to him. But yeah, no, if Fields goes there, he could absolutely ball out in that system.
Yeah, no doubt. And if you guys are interested in seeing more of the PFF draft coverage, of course, head over to PFF.com. We're going to have podcasts and things on the website all draft weekend long. Dwayne and I are going to do a few things as well. next weekend. So get excited for that. Follow Ian Hartitz at iHartitz, Hartitz. But I don't have to tell you guys that. Everybody already follows him. Jeez Louise. Follow me at Drake Fantasy. And Dwayne is, of course, at Dwayne McFarland. Spell it DWAIN McFarland. And the show is at FF Hustle. Man, Ian, thanks so much for coming aboard, man. We had a jam-packed almost 80 minutes here.
Thank you, dudes. We didn't even cover everything. I wanted to get my bold predictions off my chest.
Please, fire away. What the hell? Why not?
Real quick, for the season, I think Cam Akers should be the top second-year RB ahead of Jonathan Taylor. I am not quite ranking him there, but I think Austin Eckler has legit overall RB1 upside, and the closer we get to draft day, I might try to squeeze him in that top 5. Basically, the closest thing to Alvin Kamara we still might have left in fantasy football, with all due respect to AK 41. In the draft, I think the Jaguars will go high round RB, and I'm going to immediately make a joke about James RB3 son. That will not go over well. And then finally, I think the Titans will draft a wide receiver at 22, and I think people will immediately realize how potentially fantasy friendly this situation is, and they might just leapfrog everyone sans Jamar Chase at the position. So fun times, dudes. Happy to talk. And yeah, guys, what do we got? 10 more days till these guys land on a squad, and we'll have more to talk about. So good times.
Absolutely. Dwayne, anything else before we get out of here? I think we need a refill. I know my beer is gone, and the wine glass is getting low there for Mr. Hartitz.
No, I need a refill too. No, man, I love what Ian threw out there at the end. Always good to have some of those hot takes. I don't really have anything extra for tonight. We've been hitting people with stuff over the last few weeks, but I'm with both of you guys, just ready for the draft to get here and get these people on teams, and then we can really start tweaking our projections and really that's the point where it's like it's game on, right? I'll start drafting best ball teams, all that kind of stuff. So I'm super stoked.
Yeah, if I could give a draft bold take also, I think, and I've said it before on the show, Kyle Pitts ends up in Dallas. I think he falls enough. There's quarterbacks getting taken at the top, and then you'll see it, maybe somebody reaches up for a wide receiver, and then I'm like, Jerry's like, I got to have this guy. Got to have him. And then just forget about it. Dak is going, before the first round. But, it is what it is. So, folks, for Dwayne, for Ian, I am Brian. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Check out the YouTube page. Please subscribe, leave some comments. And as always, never get out hustled. We'll see you, folks. Take care.